Hello, everybody. Hello. So my name is Kalonji Nzinga. I'm assistant professor in learning sciences and human development over in the School of Education. I'm always happy to be here with the Atlas colleagues. Y'all, are doing such innovative work, and it's always good to be in conversation with y'all, technologists. Um, so I wanted to start off today with a recording that I think, puts a lot of work that I've been working on the last few years into perspective. And I think it also connects some of that work to a growing conversation around what has been most recently targeted and attacked DEI, right? And so I'm going to start off with a particular video. This was a performance by an artist by the name of Erica Badu, who I am arguing, and many have argued before me, is the originator of a very particular term by the name of woke. And I want, if you could, for you to listen to this performance and just think a little bit about what you're feeling. What are you taking from this performance? And then from that, we'll kind of go around and folks can kind of share. And also, I'd like to know y'all's names and who I'm talking to. So that'd be a good time to do that as well. Sound good? All right. So let's start with the video. Hopefully we can get some sound. What if there was no business, only master teacher? Wait up. What if there was no niggas, only master teacher? Hey, even when you daddy ain't got no money to support your baby. Hold on. Even when the preacher tell you some lies and cheating on your mama. Even though you're going through struggle and strive to keep ahead in your life. Hey, everybody knows a black or white. There's glitches in every shape and size. All right, so that was Erica Badu. She's performing this song called Master Teacher. It's off of an album that was released in 2008, right? This performance, I think, was 2009, 10, somewhere in that area. And so I wanted to kind of talk about how you guys are feeling about what you just saw. And so if you could, we're going to just go around and maybe we'll also go around to the folks on Zoom. And if you could say your name and also perhaps say one word that stands out to you when you think about this refrain that keeps going on. I stay woke, right? So there's, you can see this come up again and again, which Erica is saying this phrase, I stay woke. What do you think she's meaning by woke in this moment? And maybe just one word that kind of stands out to you, or a couple words, but maybe say your name and then what's your maybe interpretation. And so I'll start. So again, my name is Kalonji. And one of the things that I feel like she may be saying is something about being aligned. Alignment is the word I'll take. Alignment. And so can I pass it to you, my colleague?
I'm Shaz, Dr. Shaz. Keep coming back to like vigilance.
Mm.
And at Dola, what I thought of was made me think I've always been woke ever since I became 3 or 4 years old.
Mm.
I'm Rick and aware.
Aware.
There's all I stay empathetic.
I'm Michael. I think I'm
clarity.
Mm,
And meaning, being there.
being there.
Hi, I'm John. I just had like the whole performance, everything almost felt kind of hopeful in a way. And once you're aware that it fixed the problem.
Hopeful, I like that.
I'm Tracy. I'm Tracy. And the word that stuck out to me was, well, two words, master teacher. Master
Master
teachers.
teacher.
Mhm.
My name is Ellen, and actually two words struck out to me. One is struggle, one is beautiful.
Mm,
Like it's a beautiful world, and I'm
Mhm.
struggle. I have no money to feed my baby. Yeah,
wow, that's really interesting because we're going to come to an organization that we worked with later. Their name is Al-Rawad, and Al-Rawad means beautiful struggle.
okay. Wow.
So I don't know. That's just we're woke today. We're all locked in. Maybe we should go to our folks online. Sorry, I'm not as gifted with the Zoom space. Where did our
And
people
you have
go?
lots of windows and
I know it's a lot going on. Let's see.
you can see. Should I call out the name? What happened to the?
What happens if you click on Zoom?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that will show up.
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah. Zoom work, right?
Zoom work, right? Or I can just call them out. We got. Yes. 3-finger slide.
There should be a participant.
Did you see that?
Oh, it window?
No.
How about a meeting? What was it?
You click away.
Bring up the front. What was it that will show up?
If you
No?
click away, like click on your background and then use 3 fingers and swipe left or right, you'll probably find it. 3 fingers. Yeah, any way to get to your desktop, so you have multiple desktops. Yeah, for sure.
Is it here
Might be if
or
I'm
not?
There's some user.
That's just the browser, so if you close that, you might get,
Yeah.
yeah. Yep, yep. Right.
It's that you're on one desktop and you have to get to the other ones. Do you have a navigation button on your keyboard?
So you might hit escape.
Yeah, hitting escape maybe. I don't know. All right, or I can just tell you who's online. We got Kate, Hanif, JP, and Nilima.
Sure. Would anyone like to start us off?
Hi, this is Kate. And the word that stood out to me was everybody.
Everybody.
Everybody. All right.
Yes.
I'm Neelima, and the two words that stood out to me were resilience and diversity.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Atif. The word that stuck to me is freedom. I think freedom and it's challenging to the environment and to the world.
Freedom. I like
Wow,
that. Thank
okay.
you.
This is JP. The word that came up for me was not in the track. It was the Zen word wu, mu, which is the answer to koans when you don't know anything.
Mm,
Wow.
interesting. And you said a
Is
Zen
that-
word?
Yeah, it's a word in Zen which is sort of a negation, or so for example, a monk asks the master, does a dog have Buddha nature or not? And the master says this word. And the reason it came up for me is I have no idea what she intended. I have nothing or very little in common with her lived experience. I don't understand the context in which she was singing, so I have no basis for forming an opinion.
Wow.
That's fair. Thank you.
Okay.
Was that everyone on Zoom?
Yes, I think so.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so sorry for the technical difficulties. We wish we could see your faces while you gave these answers. But all right. So I wanted to kind of shift to, how I'm thinking about this talk. And so I think Erica is providing us with a lens through which to think about what does learning mean, right? I think that woke and the consciousness that she's invoking, and when she's talking about woke, is very much focused on some understanding of an elevated level of consciousness that perhaps us as learning scientists would be interested in trying to operationalize, to make sense of. And part of the argument that I'm making is that Black music in particular is a form of technology that does have an influence on our consciousness. It does have an influence on the way that we learn. And I'm going to also show some different environments, learning environments in particular, that I've been a part of the design of, that actually utilize Black music as a way for creating moments of learning, right? And so I'm going to kind of walk through that, but I wanted to now hear from the horse's mouth, Erica,
Could be.
on what is
But we
woke,
did
right?
start a lot of stuff on there.
Yeah.
There's a song on this particular album called Master Teacher. And in that song, Master Teacher, the chorus is I Stay Woke. So Stay Woke was introduced to the world by way of this album, New America Part 1. And I tweeted it once. Georgia Ann Muldrow actually wrote the song. She's singing with me. And I tweeted it about this group that was detained, Pussy Riot. They're this group of activists who are artists. And in my tweet, I said, free Pussy Riot and hashtag stay woke. After that, woke took off and became many things.
Let's talk about it. It became, you bring up that fact, which is your art took this concept, ideas and words can evolve, but it really put this out, this idea we should wake up to these problems and stay woke.
Sure.
We made something for you, Eric. It's just like a minute.
Okay.
But we track how you started it and how it spread, and then how some on the right are sort of hijacking or attacking it or giving it a different definition.
Sure.
So I want to play this for you since you bring it up, and then we could talk about it.
All right.
Even though you go through struggle and strive to keep a healthy life, stay woke. Everybody knows a black or white. There's creatures in every shape and size. Stay woke.
Stay woke. It's just urging folks to pay attention, to be alert.
Stay woke.
Wow.
I want my culture to stay woke, but I want the other cultures that's supporting us to stay woke.
Woke fascism that will destroy our nation.
We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. Florida is where woke goes to die.
I think they mean black.
So I think if Erica was, we were privileged to have her in this circle, she probably introduced it, and she would have said black, right? And maybe that's the word that we're avoiding saying in this moment, right? And so part of the reason why I wanted to start with this is because I wanted to point to some of the ways in which Black music is the origin space of language, of vibrations, of rhythms that then begin to affect the way we talk, the way our discourse is shaped around ideas of diversity, but also just around our ideas of humanity, right? And so Erica is arguing that the response to woke also is not just anti-woke, but it is in some ways anti-Black, right? And so this term Black, right? This is, I want to talk about why I'm thinking about this in terms of Black music, right? And so what does that mean? How are we operationalizing those words, right? So when first I'm thinking about musical traditions that came from the African diaspora, right? So we talk about musical traditions like, samba, like jazz, like blues, all spirituals, hip hop, all of these different genres of music have been influenced by the African communities in which some of those traditions were originated, right? Second, I'd like to kind of, problematize that definition and think even beyond it, right? And so part of what we're also saying when we say Black music, whereas we're talking about an ethos or an aesthetic, right? So we're talking about a philosophy of art that acknowledges that the fundamental nature of the universe is both dark and musical, right? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about Blackness, about musicality as elements, to sort of these twin elements of what we'll talk about as learning, but in the Kemetic language, we talk about it as Samba, right? And so moving on to some of the research questions. So again, knowing that Black music is something that, emerges from the African diaspora, what if Black music is actually a spiritual technology, right? With origins beyond that, even in the common ancestors of our species, right? And perhaps even in the cosmic origins of the universe, right? And so we're expanding the aperture beyond the transatlantic slave trade and thinking about a sort of wider, more global understanding of what it means to be Black and musical, right? Also, what can we learn about the mechanisms of human learning from investigating it as fundamentally Black and musical, right? And then third, and not last but not least, how does examining Black music help us design learning environments? What can we learn from Black music and Black musicality that can help us to design learning environments in this current age, right, of artificial intelligence? So again, so that first definition of Black music, right? When we think about Black music, we have to first go back to a historical period that in Swahili, we refer to as maafa, right? And maafa is a word for disaster, right? It is a word for the disaster of, in particular, the transatlantic slave trade, right? And so this is an infographic that was created to represent research that shows the quantification of Black lives that moved in this migration across the Atlantic Ocean, right? So we're talking about millions of people who moved from the period of 1619 to the abolition of slavery in 1863, all the way to the Americas, right? And so we're thinking about what is the massive amount of lives that were moved in this space? Again, a grand tragedy when it comes to human life. Millions of Black folks did not make it across that voyage, so millions of lives were lost. And those that made it to the Americas, of course, we know about this period of enslavement and the terrible conditions that existed there. Without that, along with that, however, there was a grand tradition that was also transported. Culture was also transported. Language was also transported. And so when we think about the musical traditions of, again, samba, the blues, hip hop, all of these take elements and aesthetics from the African music of various different communities across the continent of Africa, right? And so, and we can see some of those elements when it comes to call and response, when it comes to polyrhythms, various different sort of elements that were preserved, right, during this trip. All right, so I want to, if we think about Black music from that framework, I want to sort of zoom out and zoom back in time, right, to another African diaspora, right? And so one of the things that has bugged me much about our education is that when we learn about the evolution of human beings, why do we not trace all of our ancestry back to Africa, right? If we know what has, what anthropologists say, what geneticists say, what various different scientists have discovered about the history of the human species, we all started in Africa, right? The behaviorally modern, anatomically modern Homo sapiens began in Africa. And so this is an infographic that shows what has been referred to as the human dispersal, right? From, our traditional roots, starting somewhere in East Africa. These dates have shifted as people have, found different discoveries. Somewhere between 65,000 and 300,000 years ago, people that would have had all of the language capabilities that we have, all of the cultural faculties that we have, would have been living in Africa for thousands of years before even moving, of course, off, into Eurasia, into Southern Asia, and then, often into the Pacific, across the Bering Strait into the Americas. Right. And so when we talk about Black music, I'm going to make an argument, too, that our original ancestors were both Black and musical as well, right? This is an excerpt from a Newsweek article that came out in the 1990s that is talking about what has been termed mitochondrial Eve, right? Mitochondrial Eve is supposed to be our oldest common relative who was, figured out to be a Black woman, right? And so when we think about this is a provocative sort of visualization, but this is supposed to be, perhaps what if this is what our, original human beings look like, right? And so in a text by Edward Bruce Bynum, he has a very interesting book that I've often read in some of my classes called Our African Unconscious. And he says, all the diverse races with their colors and variations are unfolded from a common human or parent stock, who in all likelihood was a small, dark-skinned African. This is the personal lineage of every human being, an ancient dark mother. It seems that the first human families were also dark or moral and negrito, a psychic reality buried deep in the human psyche and held there today by strong repressive forces. Interesting, right? And so he's talking about some of this, again, archaeological information and research that has led to these ideas, but he also talks about what he calls a strong repressive force, right? And I want to kind of unpack that a little bit. Is why isn't this an origin story that is a sort of common human story that is, deeply, meaningful in our education, meaningful in how we see ourselves? That I think Bynum would argue is that there are strong repressive forces that are both anti-Black, anti-Africa, that allow us to distance ourselves from these relatives of ours, right? All right, and
Can I make a comment on that last picture?
Sure.
I like the way the original Eve, I like the look she's giving Adam as he hands her the apple.
Say more. What do you see?
I see her going, should I trust you? I just like that look.
It's the eye roll, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like the,
Yeah.
uh-oh.
So I've got a question.
Sure.
The more overarching force that I think we see is the fear of the other, not necessarily repression against a Blackness within us, but there's a common tribal fear that cuts across everything. That is, if you're not like I am, I fear you. How does that fit into the way you think about this?
That's a great question. I absolutely think that xenophobia is an important element in the conversation when it comes to both our political moment right now, as well as the history of colonization. But I do want to talk about a form of anti-Blackness that I think is distinct, that I think has something that is certainly aligned with xenophobia, but I think is actually its own characteristic that we need to sort of develop out. And so like folks like Frantz Fanon, who wrote Black Skin, White Masks, right? He's trying to think about something that is both a colonial sort of understanding of the other as conquerable, but something that is fundamentally about Blackness and darkness, right? We think about colorism that even exists, in our communities around the world, right? That there's some forms of colorism, of dark-skinned people being on the bottom of of multiple societies. The caste system in India, we could think about other elements of this, right? And so I think that's a great conversation that needs to be disentangled, and the way that which we kind of think through these, we need to be very specific about those differences, right? Okay, and so with that, I wanted to talk a little bit about my argument, and I expect this to be a little bit provocative, right? That the first behaviorally modern, right? The first anatomically modern humans that walked the earth, that were, bipedal, that, had opposable thumbs, that could actually have modern brains that were, able to process language, all of these different aspects. I'm arguing, and the research, I think, deeply shows that these folks had dark skin, right? This is a representation that was created by some archaeologists and graphic artists reconstructing the face of a dark-skinned Jebel Irhoud, right? And he's one of the first Homo sapiens found in northeastern Africa, dated now around 300,000 years ago, right? This would have been someone, again, that was Homo sapiens sapiens, in terms of, language capacity, in terms of what we think of abilities cognitively, would have had modern abilities in that respect, right? So the ancestral state, when we look at skin color, the original skin color would have been this sort of dark skin tone, right? All right. I also wanted to show what is on our right. It is a picture of our vocal tract, right? This is a video that I'm going to show that is, it basically shows our vocal tract. And one of the things that makes human beings so incredibly able to engage in what we think of as culture is language, right? And when we talk about language, language is literally the ability of our vocal tract to vibrate in accordance with some sort of linguistic information, right? And so thinking about music as fundamentally part of what it means to do language and to engage in language, right? We are engaging in this sort of vibration, which is also fundamentally tonal. And so I want to show a little bit of this to show what it looks like when our vocal tract is vibrating. Okay. Okay. Do that soft. More E. There we go. Okay, take a breath. E, and do it loud. Nice, beautiful voice.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, did we lose this again? Wait, sorry. So I want to again make the argument that our ancient ancestors are also musical by nature, right? They have encoded in them this instrument, tonal instrument, that is honestly responsible for the ways in which we're able to communicate, right? All right, moving on a little bit in history, this is actually a carving of the first singer in the historical record, right? This is E.T., who is an ancient in ancient Egypt in a city called Saqqara, and she is depicted with her hand placed upon her ear. She is singing, and she is in conversation with the harpist here, right? One of the things that you'll notice about this is that even that in the tradition of ancient Kemet, Egypt, there was a representation of singers which always had their hand on the ear. They realized that the ear is very central to this understanding of what it means to sing, what it means to be musical, is more so about actually listening. This is actually a trip that I took in this summer to Egypt, right? And so one of the interesting things about, and so I'm very close to Saqqara at this point, which is where E.T. and Hekanu are depicted on the inside of the tomb. But this is another tomb. And one thing that stands out about this particular area is one, look at the skin color of those that are on the inside of the tombs, right? We could, they were, I mean, if you look at going place to place throughout the remains of ancient Egypt, you are sort of blown away by how well preserved everything has remained over years, both colors and dyes that they use, but then also just the structures themselves. And so one of the things that comes out of this tradition is the idea of the Seba, right? And so as someone that's very interested in learning, Seba is the word for learning, but it also at the same time means teacher, right? And so there's this sort of dialogical relationship between teacher and learner that are sort of represented there. It also means a star or to light up as a star does, right?
Mm.
Okay, so I'm gonna actually skip a little bit ahead, right? And so when thinking about, again, Black music as something that is sort of fundamental to the human experience and the Black experience, I want to talk a little bit about what I am referring to, which actually refers to a term from Fanon, which is negrophobia, right? Negrophobia, right? What does it mean to be to have a fear of Black people, a fear of Blackness as a space, right? And so this is actually the title of a album by Public Enemy, right? And Public Enemy had an album called Fear of a Black Planet, right? And so they're trying to make sense of what Fanon refers to as a psychological complex, that it consists of an irrational, deep-seated fear of Black people, right? And so one of the things that Fanon connects this to is colonization, but also anti-Blackness in multiple spaces, right? And so metaphorically, many people have talked about this, given our Black origins, our African origins, that maybe it's also the fear of our origin, right? It's the fear that could be tied to our ancestral state, the fear of the womb, right? Again, Fanon was very much tied to Freudian and Jungian sort of perspectives on the psyche. And so he was very much interested in sort of the repressed psyche, right? And so when we talk about colonization and negrophobia, I want to talk a little bit about a connection of negrophobia to violence, but in particular, violence towards Black music. This is actually Radio Raheem, right? How many people saw Do the Right Thing? Is this a film that people have ever seen before? All right, got some people that have seen it. So Spike Lee made this film, Do the Right Thing. And this character, Radio Raheem, actually represents I would say the socio-technical infrastructure of Black music, right? He walks around with this giant boombox, right? The JVC RC M90, right? Which is actually at the time nicknamed the king of boomboxes. And in this film, there is a very deeply traumatic moment of Radio Raheem losing his life, right? And he loses his life at the hand of the police, right? But prior to this moment, which could be in many ways referred to as a lynching, there is the lynching or the mutilation of Radio Raheem's boombox, right? So Radio Raheem and some other Black youth in the neighborhood are challenging Sal, the owner of an Italian restaurant, about his racism. And Sal, furious in an act to silence this critique, grabs a baseball bat and begins to viciously beat the shit out of the boombox, right? Swing after swing of the bat, crashing against the metal of the JVC RC M90. Sal then admits that destroying the boombox amounts to a form of spirit murder, right? When he shouts out, "I just killed your fucking radio." His statement suggests that radios can be killed, that they contain life, and that another way of killing Black communities is to destroy their musicality. This altercation escalates until police are called. Officers then strangle Radio Raheem, crushing the police baton against his windpipe. And so there's a very vicious scene that we see of the life of Radio Raheem being taken. And so I want to say to try to resurrect Radio Raheem and to
Say that like our vibe, what we say, I shake. Yeah, I'm with the. Say that like our vibe, what we say, I shake. Yeah, I'm with the.
Okay. So I wanted to show a couple examples of what I'm calling Black music as a socio-technical system, right? And when we talk about a socio-technical system, the research on this talks about both the social elements and the technological elements of a system, right? And so when we talk about Radio Raheem is a person with all of these sort of social connections. When we talk about analyzing a particular band that we saw with Erykah Badu, may have been all of the individuals that were playing in that band, but they're also the technologies that they're using are part of that system as well, right? And so that can go all the way from this is Brother Kiazi from Oakland. He has the djembe drum. The djembe drum could be one form of technology connected to these systems. Of course, Radio Raheem's radio. This is a DJ Hex Kitten from Denver, who is a friend of mine who also, utilizes turntables. And so these various forms of technologies become part of a system that is in many ways sacred to producing Black music, right? All right, so I want to go over quickly a few different projects that I've been working on that in many ways I would say are building socio-technical infrastructures, right? So what does that mean? That means oftentimes it's a form of community organizing, bringing individuals together who are the people that need to be here on this project for it to work. But then it's also designing the technology, designing a studio, designing the types of technologies that would be needed in order to produce a particular outcome connected to this history of Black music, right? And so I'm going to go through a couple projects. The first one I'm going to go through quickly is a project that was interested in archiving elements of Black music, right? And so that project was in particular interested in looking at what were termed rap proverbs. So looking at the history of hip hop, thinking about what are words of wisdom that have come out of hip hop, maybe perhaps woke being one of them, right? Staying woke. But what are these sort of terms and terminologies, discourses that have come out of hip hop music that have in many ways structured our discourse and actually have theorized many forms of Black uplift, right? And so I'm actually going to skip Lil Wayne. This was actually an excerpt from an article that was written in Global Hip Hop Studies. But I want to talk a little bit about the rap proverbs, right? And so we looked at a few different ideas. One was the idea of real recognized real, right? And so that is sort of a conversation about authenticity, right? That the authentic people gravitate to one another. Something like Fight the Power, right? That was actually, came out during the film that we just watched by Spike Lee. That was Public Enemy's song Fight the Power. But there were these examples of phrases that kind of came from hip hop culture that then have an effect on the world. And so one of the things that we were looking at was going through the canon of hip hop lyrics and trying to make sense of who had said these words, what were they trying to say, and how are these in some ways sort of ethical declarations in a certain way, right? The second thing that we did, we were interested not only in archiving them and knowing where they existed in lyrics, but what do young people think about these lyrics? So the article that was actually published in Cognition and Instruction was trying to understand how are young people making sense of and utilizing these words of wisdom in their sort of ways of life, right? This is actually a chloropleth intensity map that harvested a lot of data from Twitter. And this was, we were able to look at these particular phrases and how these phrases were used over Twitter for a period of time. This was about 30 days, and it was a phrase called "No New Friends." No New Friends is this sort of loyalty to your old friends, but it was connected. It was actually by Drake. And if anyone knows about, there's been a very contentious beef between hip hop artists, Drake being one of them, Kendrick Lamar being another. But this is actually showing the sort of global sort of reach of this term that Drake created in 2013. This was actually 2017 when we collected the data. So 4 years later, people are still around the world using these particular language constructions. We could think of a similar thing, type of study for woke, right? Woke would probably produce a similar type of global impact, right? All right. So that is sort of one study. I want to kind of zoom ahead to another study that was actually building learning environments in solidarity with an organization by the name of Al Rawad, right? Al Rawad is an organization in the West Bank in Palestine. We actually collaborated with this organization to teach hip hop to a group of youth that are part of that program. Al Rawad, which means, again, beautiful struggle, is a organization created in order to engage youth in arts. They, for the most part, engage in traditional Palestinian arts, so dance, music, but some of the youth were very much interested in how can we also engage with hip hop as a form of learning as well, right? And so I want to talk a little bit about our experience sort of working with some of the technologies of digital audio workstations, MPCs, with these youth, right? So I'm going to show you a clip of a moment that happened with the youth as we were first getting there, right? We're first traveling to the West Bank, and we're actually setting up our technology, having issues like I did today, which kind of happens. But we're trying to figure out how to set this up. We're nervous. There's a lot of youth here that speak some English. We don't, there were a couple people on our team that did speak Arabic. I don't speak any Arabic. So part of like the language barrier is there. But there was a moment that happened that I think also illustrates in many ways the resonance of Black music, right? Oh, sorry. Right. So just to narrate a bit of what you saw there, there was three Palestinian youth. One has a flute. He, I would say, is the origin of this resonant moment, right? Mm-hmm. He starts playing a melody on the flute, right? And many of you may have heard this melody before, but it is from a song called "We Shall Overcome," right? And what you see in this moment is people that don't know each other. Again, we're, being sort of drawn in to performing together, right? This is our first moment of meeting each other, but there was a recognition, right? There was a recognition by Matassem in this moment, who's playing the flute, that perhaps these, folks from Black America have heard this before, that this may be a way of creating and building the socio-technical infrastructure that we would need to communicate in this space when there's a huge language barrier right here as well. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about this particular song, "We Shall Overcome," right? We know that this has a history. Again, when "We Shall Overcome," there's a story about Martin Luther King visiting the Highlander Center. And the Highlander Center was an organization that trained activists in various different forms of social resistance. And one of the things that they trained them on was music, right? What are the freedom songs that we need to sing? And so this was the first time Martin Luther King apparently heard this song, "We Shall Overcome." And he's, the response that he gave was apparently, "That's a really catchy song," right? And so as we know, that became one of the anthems of the civil rights movement. But one of the things that we noticed was the ways in which this song, this resonant movement song, was spread around the world, right? We were able to travel to a place like Palestine and notice that young people there who had dreams of freedom were accessing the spiritual technology of Black music as a way to express some of their own desires, their own struggles, right? And so thinking about, part of the analysis was thinking about how this song has transformed over time, right? I want to shift.
No. It's very important to give an idea about the way we are living with Palestinians. Among Palestinians, usually I say we are privileged, well accepted, well respected. I never felt discriminated because of my color. If you go around, you'll find sisters married to Palestinians, Palestinian brothers married to Palestinian girls. We are well accepted, well respected. I think it has to do with our role or contribution on the level of the national struggle. It's well known the African community used to be always among the avant-garde. For example, The first Palestinian female to be put in Israeli jails came from the African quarter. I'm talking about Sister Fatima Barnawi, second generation, the father from Nigeria, the mother from Jericho. She was sentenced 30 years, of which she passed 11 years deported. She came back with Chairman Arafat in 1994. Today she is the chief of the Palestinian police female in the Palestinian Authority. Now my story.
About there, about this brother Ali Jidda, was a tour guide that we had when we went to Jerusalem, right? And one of the things that floored me in that trip was the fact that there were Afro-Palestinians, right? That there was this history of people that have moved from Mali, from different parts of Africa, and who had been a part of the Palestinian community for several generations, right? And so thinking about not only did we witness so many human rights violations against the Palestinian communities that we worked with, but that those were also connected to Black folks, right? That there were Black Palestinians that were also part of those stories as well. I just want to shed a quick light on the moment that we are particularly in around this particular event. We have, several students. I think, given that we are on university campuses, it is so critical to understand the role that students play in academic freedom, that students, when they protest, when they rise up, when they think outside of the box, that it is important that we have to protect them. And as we know, there have been several deportations of young students at Columbia, Cornell, Tufts, now at Colorado as well. 10 students recently were targeted for deportation, right? And so thinking about how these are connected to these stories, right? I want to then quickly so this is back to the structure that we created within our WAD. This is one of the researchers and designers of the space, Khalid Bowen. He's working on a digital audio workstation right here called the Ableton Push. And they're working together on a project in which they're actually sampling Palestinian music. Actually, this is actually not a Palestinian artist. It's a Lebanese artist by the name of Fayrouz. Fayrouz is a who would be analogous? The Beyonce? I don't know. Someone like an extremely Whitney Houston, probably more like that. To within Arab music, and so what they're doing is using this sort of hip hop technology as a way not just to create I would say African American music, but this is how are we using it as a form of sampling the histories of the Arab world, right? And so you'll kind of see what they produce in this particular moment, right? Try to give you some sound. All right, so I will end there. I guess we have no minutes at all, but yeah, I'll end there. If there's any questions or thoughts to we can I'll be here to talk for a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you.
wanted to, I don't know if you came across this study, it came out, I think it was about a decade ago, that found the first origins of stability of light-skinned Morse in the human race was like shortly after the formation of civilization. It was like 6,000 years ago. So I could send you that study.
I would love to
kind
see
of
that.
fortifies your argument that, you know, there's also genetic work that's showing the same thing.
Wow, yeah, I would love to see that work. Yeah, yeah, the Moors are incredible historians. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Other questions or thoughts? I have time. I just don't want to hold up.
I was excited about the third. Everything was wonderful. I was excited about the third act, the AI stuff. Do you have the slides going to be available just so I can think through what you're thinking on?
I'm happy to share the slides if that's okay.
Yeah. I mean.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it too. I mean, so part of the project was actually a collaboration with Fisk Planetarium on campus, where and the project was called Taking Up Space. And so we were interested with sort of two ideas around that metaphor. So taking up space as a metaphor for Black communities being able to belong in spaces that they're not traditionally having access to. Planetariums being sort of one of them, or, you know, and so, but then also, of course, space, right? Thinking about the ways in which, you know, to some extent, Black communities have always imagined astronomy, right? There's always been sort of an interest in, you know, traditions of astronomy within, you know, the Dogon community of Africa, very, you know, Kemet, all of these different formats. And so we used AI as a sort of tool to sort of visualize some of those things. So we created some using Midjourney. We were creating generative AI images that sort of took on some of the prompts that we were imagining around those two ideas of taking up space and what that could look like. And we were able to utilize the 360-degree panoramic dome within the Fisk Planetarium to project those images that were sort of AI generated. But that's sort of